Well, hello, everyone, and welcome to Live Repurpose Live, where we inspire you to live on purpose and create a life that you love by design. My name is Lissa Figgins, and it's my mission to help after 40 women like you to design your life in 7 key areas so you can experience more balance, more growth, and more impact. And it's my intention each and every week to introduce you to an amazing woman who is not only on this journey, but is also inspiring others on their journey as well. So today I'm excited to introduce you to my friend Christina Weber. She is the founder and CEO of Business Owners on Fire. I love that title. And she helps faith-based entrepreneurs who want to generate more abundance in your revenue, in your time, in your clients, in your relationships, while still keeping God and those relationships and purpose first on a daily basis. What I love is that Christine helps women create an ideal life and business blueprint so that it will allow you to build more value and experience the peace and joy from living when you are truly aligned with your values, your vision, and your mission. So Christina, I think the message you have to share is so amazing, but I'm sure it's not, kind of where you were when you came out of the womb. So just catch us up a little bit about your story, your journey, and how you got to helping specifically women in this area.
Well, I actually work with men and women, and
Okay.
the company's Christian Biz Owners on Fire. So, I guess just how I ended up here, where I am like at this moment, were some unexpected turns in my own life. I'm
Mm,
very devout in my faith, but ended up divorced after 24 years in a marriage. And I could never have imagined that would be my situation. I'm actually a mental health provider. I'm a licensed clinician and worked for a couple decades. So that part of that unexpected turn is that kind of shape what I'm doing is I really have a pretty high tolerance for pain, emotional.
mm,
And I really didn't recognize the level of, I would say, dysfunction or serious kind of pathology that was going on, because I kind of flow with that. It's kind of like what you
sure.
know is what you're used to. So kind of where that turned for me, it was, obviously not the plan, not the vision. And then having to kind of respond to that. And one of
Mm,
my spiritual superpowers is resilience. So, I
mm,
could go in the corner and be in the fetal position, or I
right?
could, kind of try to take the lemons, make lemonade. So that's really where I went, and kind of where God's taking me right now with that is really seeing myself as kind of a transitional character. I mean, I think I'm very self-aware. I was kind of surprised that I didn't see a lot of the things that have continued to unfold about, some of the wounds in my family of origin,
Mm,
my family, my background of my family. And what I realize is that God's really calling me to be a transitional character, to stop the dysfunction moving forward.
mm,
And so that's really inspired me to not only professionally but just the level I need to operate on a personal level to, to be that role in my family, kind of a higher love type of thing. So,
right.
and that kind of took me to my career. I mean, I was probably perfectly content hanging out in my therapy office for 10 years, but it's not a very profitable business model. And I was a single parent. So what I did is I reinvented myself. I'm basically a blend of a business and life coach. I'm all about vision, which
Mm,
was what helped me be resilient. It's like I couldn't get through what I was going through if I couldn't visualize where I wanted to go. And so I help business owners do that. I use my marriage and family therapy skills all the time. And quite honestly, just my own experience, it's really helped me serve people that would never approach me if I had the white picket fence and everything else. Really kind of seeing that God doesn't invite, dysfunction or divorce or all of that, but he can even take something that's bad and use it for good. So
mm,
what it's allowed me to do is be a resource for a lot of different people in a way that makes them feel empathy is a very high skill for me. So makes them really not feel ashamed of where they are, even in business. I mean, just we can easily get feeling ashamed of cash flow's not right, or I'm disorganized or whatever. There's just something about kind of the ringer I've been through that just makes me really put people at ease with that, so we can really solve problems and help people achieve their vision, which for me, a big part of that is sustainable prosperity and abundance. Because I've
Mm,
seen people, make the money and have a miserable life because they
right.
don't have a pace they can maintain. They don't even enjoy what they do.
Mm,
Or I've seen people that have a good quality of life but don't have the revenue coming in. And that's not prosperity. And the abundance piece is around time, and having the time. The
mm,
definition I like to use with abundance: having the time to do the things I need to do when I need to do it, and having everything that I need, all that I need, some of my wants, and money to put away, and energy for the future. So that's really where I take people, because that's what I want. So I'm my own ideal client.
right. Isn't that so interesting? I find that such a common thread that oftentimes the way that we are serving today is an outcome from our own journey. And
Mhm.
like you said, it's not always the straight and narrow path that we thought it was going to be, or this beautiful, perfect, picture that we had maybe back years ago. Sometimes there are twists and turns and what looks like detours and what looks like, switchbacks and circles and that type of thing. And yet I think those make the most beautiful stories, right? Because that's where, number one, I feel like God shows up in a big way, because it's not about me.
Mhm.
And it's very apparent that we are not the ones that are in control, and we can't do this on our own. But then, like you said, I think that makes you so much more relatable to other people, to say, okay, so she doesn't have this all together, or life hasn't always been perfect. And, but she's come through it. And so, being able to kind of reach back that hand to that person that's, where you were,
Mhm.
is such a gift. And I think you are able then to minister to them, whether it's through life, life coaching or business coaching, in a way that maybe somebody who hasn't experienced that, wouldn't be able to speak into some of those things
Mhm.
in the same
Oh,
way.
absolutely.
So,
Yeah.
right. Yeah. And then, God brings the right people across our path, and the people that really resonate, with our story, and with what, our purpose and vision is, and where it is that we're going. So there are a couple of words that you brought up. I was an educator, so I love words, and I love thinking about what they mean and how they relate to what we're talking about. One of the ones that you talked about was resilience.
Mhm.
And you specifically mentioned vision being really important when tied to resilience. So let's talk a little bit about what is resilience. How is this something that is really impactful? What happens when we don't have resilience, and how does vision take us in that right direction that we want to go next?
Yeah, I think our culture doesn't really support grieving or
Mm,
or loss. I mean, we're because at the snap of the fingers, we can have something to distract us, or
right.
whatever. But I think a big part of resilience is grieving.
Mm,
We have to recognize what the loss was, what we had hoped things would be like. We need to go through that process. So it's not about just
mm,
distracting yourself and focusing on the next step, because if you haven't done the piece on the processing the loss, then you're not. It's kind of like your ladder may be at the wrong up to the wrong building. So
right.
we need to really learn from what didn't go right. Where we're at, and not react to what happened, but
Mm,
respond.
mm,
So basically that's a big part of it. The other part of it is, once we don't stay in that grieving, we
right.
go through the process, and then a lot of times it's when you acknowledge the loss, then you have a lost feeling. It's like, well, this isn't what I thought I'd be doing, or this isn't, I thought I was a stay-home mom, or whatever the thing was. Then we have to really kind of, that's where the vision comes in. Well,
Okay.
what do I want? Where
Mm,
do I want? And I'm big on the holistic vision,
mhm,
because especially as women, we're so relationally oriented that it's very difficult to put your whole heart into something if it doesn't pay off in relationships in some way, if there's not an
mm,
investment in it, whether even as a
sure.
business relationship or personal, or even the relationship with God or yourself. If there's not that connection, women just aren't that motivated just to stand to be stars and make a lot of money typically. I mean, it's not that we don't want money, but if that's the only thing that the benefit of what the hard work is, it's not sustainable. It's not something,
Right.
it's lonely,
Right.
so we need to tie it to that. And then resilience is about not, courage and confidence. It's
Mm,
not about never making mistakes.
mm,
It's not about being never having other losses, because once you are willing to shoot for your vision, there will be more losses,
mm,
because there will be people who will not come with you. There will be people who want the old you. And that's another
mm,
thing with resilience. The old you's gone,
mm.
so they may want that. That's not there.
She's not
And
here.
yeah, and then once you have that new vision, there can be other casualties, because when you are pursuing your holistic vision, it brings out discomfort in anyone who is not pursuing that.
Mm,
And people have different responses to that. Some people just, it's uncomfortable to be around you.
right.
Some people feel protective, excuse me, of their relationship or whatever, because it brings out what you're doing is bringing out some of the cracks in their thing, and other people
Something
are
in them.
inspired by it.
Mm,
So you have to, if you really want to pursue that vision, and it's not where you thought you were going, and it's not who were around, you have to be willing to have the courage to say, I love myself enough, and I want to serve God enough in the way He's created me to serve Him, that I'm
right.
willing to kind of, let the chips fall where they may, and then once you have that, you can kind of go back to the losses you had. you know, I like going back to the marriage, that would have been my worst nightmare. Like I could
Mm,
never, and it's not again, like I'm promoting that or anything, or it wasn't horribly difficult. But once you've gone through hard things or lost a loved one or
mm,
got fired or, whatever, once you've had that, or had cancer, I mean, it's kind of like, okay, I mean, it wasn't great, but I get through that. You just have
right.
a freedom and a willing to take risks that you just, when it's almost more of a slavery, when
Mm,
everything in your life is working well and working the way you want. I see people actually be more trapped because they're not letting life flow, and they
mm.
want things to stay the same. And that's not the way life is if people are growing. So then it becomes kind of this trap, of just, needing to control everybody around you, because it's a scarcity behavior, actually. I have this and I don't want to lose this. Whereas when you've already lost it, it's like, whoa, there's, and you realize that the world didn't end, and there's actually, God provides something better, that you didn't expect. You just have a freedom to just be willing to fail.
Yeah.
Take
And
that
I
next
love the
step.
words you said, courage and confidence,
Mhm.
because until you've had to step out of your comfort zone, you don't always realize, hey, what's inside me, and that you could go through something difficult and come out on the other side and not only be okay, but actually be flourishing on the
Right.
other side of it. Right. And I think, I think about Job, right. And his experience. And he talked about how he had heard of God, right? And he had heard God before, but now he really saw him when he went through that difficulty. It was like
Yeah.
this renewed depth of not only his own character, but then his relationship with God, and then what things were going to look like, moving forward. And when I think about resilience, the picture that comes to mind is like a spring, so if you got a coil spring, right, there are times when there's gonna be a lot of pressure on that spring and it's going to go all the way down to like almost sitting flat. But when that pressure is released, that spring goes right back to that shape that it was. It doesn't stay flattened out, forever. And so just that being able to kind of bounce back and being able to respond right to that pressure that's coming, but not to let that totally completely throw you out of off course or into some other place that you don't want to be. And that's
Right.
really important, in having that, because life is going to be full of a lot of ups and downs and hard things. And so that resilience is going to be key, to being stronger, and coming out of that. And then I hear, I like to say we're either going into something difficult or in something difficult, or we've just come out of it, and it's just this is life, and being able to be resilient is super important.
Mhm,
So the second word that you talked about was abundance.
mhm,
And I love your definition of that, because I think a lot of times we hear abundance and we just think, oh, that's just money in the bank. But
mhm,
you really expanded it to not just be money, but I heard you say things about time. I heard you say things about relationships, even, kind of your mission and values, kind of that purpose that's encompassed in that. Why is it so important that we expand the definition of abundance beyond just the monetary things?
mhm.
And let's talk a little bit about that.
Well, it gets back to sustainable prosperity. We are multidimensional beings. Money is neutral.
Mm,
Money provides resources in exchange of gifts, or exchange of goods and services. It's necessary, and we need to get over hangups we have about receiving and all of that as well. But really, no, money doesn't make someone happy. You
mm,
know, lack of money doesn't have to make someone miserable. It really, God can provide in multiple ways. He can provide with money. He can provide with opportunities. He can provide with someone being compassionate or whatever. There's different ways that God can provide. So when we only focus on money, we're missing all of the other pieces that God wants to teach us about. And really, money is just the market is saying to you what you're putting out there. We value that.
right. It's exchanged for the
I
service you're giving, right? I like
yeah,
to
I
say it's
mean,
in proportion with what you're giving.
right. And so what the journey sometimes can be about, when we're not having the money, there may be other reasons why we're not having it. We don't learn those lessons if we're just focused on money. People really, the days of just people wanting a bunch of money, or they wanting a coach or whoever to help them to have that, they're over. No one wants that. I mean, they really don't. They may say that they want a whole person. So if
Right.
you're not showing up who you're being and what service you're providing or what you're putting out in the world, even if you have an employee or employer relationship, whatever, isn't bringing back fruit, um,
Mm,
then there are other areas that need attention. And if we
mm,
don't attend to those, then we're going to we deplete. It's about money is also exchange of energy. So
mm.
if we don't have relationships that we look forward to, people we look forward to spending time with, if we don't have the ability to get some self-care, if we can't buy healthy food for our body, we don't have time to go to the gym, we can't ever read, or we can't enjoy a relaxing afternoon, or whatever, we can't honor the Sabbath. If all of those things are things that we need, like a plant, we need all of
Mm.
those things. And so if we are not getting those, we're like putting this, I got some basil from the store, that plant, and named him Barney, and Barney didn't do real well.
Poor Barney.
No, no, I mean, I didn't know how to put him in the light. I put too much light, too much water. I mean, he didn't make it, and that's the way we are. We're like my Barney basil plant. We're out there. It's not attractive. It doesn't produce I mean, I can't make anything from the leaves of my Barney basil based on how I
Right.
cared for him. And it's just not going to generate money, and
Sure.
I felt bad, that I killed this plant. So it's just, they all go together.
Mm,
And so I guess to me, the abundance helps you kind of define what would make me happy one day at a time. And when I say happy, part of being happy is I believe we're created to know, love, and serve God. So
mm,
that's why I'm here. So that's my first task is, who do you want me to serve? How do you want me to do that? That's priority A. So
right. Right.
that's first. But then I acknowledge, like Christ, he's a human and God, I acknowledge, as a human being, God did this intentionally. We weren't created like angels. We have bodies. We have to take care of ourselves. We have to take care. We have, death. We have things we've got to deal with, realities of life. We need to eat. We need to sleep. So he gave us all of that so that we balance that. So once you define, okay, what are my priorities as a daughter of God and in service to him? What is how he's created me as a human being? What do I need for a holistic, reasonable, not I'm not talking, perfection, just reasonable life of self-care and taking care of myself and attending the areas of my life. Then you plug that in, and then you organize your commitments around that. I mean, I'm Christian lifestyle and engineering is what I do. So basically, we define the needs of the person and we create the business around it. So that's, to me, abundance. I would rather live in a $60,000 home and be able to travel and eat high quality food and have great vitamins and go to get a massage every week and go, have time to go to lunch with friends and whatever, do things with my kids, then have a $250,000 house with no furniture and no time.
Exactly. Right.
I mean, so I think that's what it's about. It's about really acknowledging, those things. And when it's your vision, a lot of times people are focusing on somebody else's vision, like, well, we should have this or we should have that. That's when you get all at whack, because it's really not what you want. It's what your mom wanted, or you're comparing or whatever, or it's coming from a darker place, or I want to impress this person or whatever. But when you really it's your vision, it's your Holy Spirit inspired vision, God will give you everything you need to have the richness of life you want. He says that, that's what he wants. That's a way to evangelize. It's attractive to people.
Yes, I've come to give you life and to give it abundantly, right? Not miserably. Not I'm sitting here, not neglecting these things. I love how you really touched on the holistic part of it, because we are spirit living inside of these earthly bodies. And so, like you said, we've got, brokenness that is a part of that. And we have all these different aspects of our life. And I love talking about, the 7 different areas of our life and comparing it to like a wheel. So if you have a wheel and, say it has little like air pocket, segments in there that are pumped up with air. If some of those areas are not as filled up as others, your wheel will still roll, but it's going to be a little bumpy, right? There are going to be some dents in the wheel. And so as your bike, your cart, whatever it is that you're going down the road in, as that's going, you're going to feel the cha-chunk, right? As it's rolling, because some of those areas, like you said, if they're not being attended to and being given the attention and intention that they need to, it's going to start affecting those other areas. And, and so when we take care of all of them and are paying attention to what's needing me right now, then we're able to give a better us to, people in our life, to our businesses, to our communities, and ultimately to the Lord. So
yeah, and I want to add on that real quick, because what a lot of people, to do it that way, to have where you are balanced, it requires faith and patience, because it's a slower success.
Right.
But what happens is those that don't do that, I heard someone say, you can sacrifice your health to have wealth, but then when you are older, you're going to have to use your wealth to help your health.
Right. It'll always cost you. That's why
it's going to get you. And so I'm the tortoise and the hare. The tortoise is going to get there slower, but if you're attending to those things, when you get there, first of all, you're ready for it, because you've been living it more of an incremental way. Right. And then it's sustainable. You already know you're doing what you enjoy, because you've been checking in the whole time and organizing it around that. And your gifts and all that. So.
And it doesn't have to, I think sometimes women hear the word balance and they think, oh my goodness, I could never be balanced, because it seems like it's such a lofty ideal. Or for example, like take your 24 hours and divide it by 7. So I have to give 207.5 minutes to each area. Like that's not life. Yeah. I think it's almost sometimes more like the guy at the circus who's spinning the plates. Right. And he gets one spinning, and maybe that's, your faith plate. And then you get the next one spinning, and that's like, the relationships, the family, the friendships. And then you have one spinning, that's the business. And then you kind of look back, and you start realizing, hey, that first one's kind of starting to wobble a little bit. I need to kind of, just keep that going. And so it's not always, I'm only focusing on that one thing, because these other things are important, but I'm paying attention to which ones are getting a little wobbly and where I might need to be a little bit more intentional and give that what it needs to keep it going, so that it doesn't come crashing down, or we don't totally crash with everything, around us. And I think that's where it kind of ties into the sustainability. If we're always go, 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 eventually we're going to run out of steam. Right. So let's talk a little bit about, what are maybe some tips. So if somebody's listening and they're thinking, okay, So I love the idea of resiliency and really, having that vision so that when life happens, I can, continue to, push on and be stronger and be resilient and, liking this new definition of abundance and what that looks like. But I think the sustainability part is sometimes a little tricky. So what might be some things that would be some practical ways for someone, who's listening and saying, okay, yeah, this sounds like a great thing. I would love to have these things in my life, but like I come and go, like I'm good for a little bit and then it goes away. And then I'm good for a little bit and then something happens. And what would you give us some advice on to move in that direction towards these things?
Of course, you just mentioned the vision and that's the first thing. But I think, first of all, temperance, to know what you really need, because sometimes we drive ourselves because we have excess. And so we've set ourselves up for an unsustainable situation, so the first thing is to kind of look at, what do I really need financially? What do I need emotionally? What do I need, first, whatever, all of those things, baseline. Now, as you grow, as you become more abundant and prosperous financially, definitely you can add those things in. But that can be the problem right there, is if you're out of bounds from the start. So once you've done that, I think one of the mistakes people make is it's okay to, we want to be disciplined, and there's nothing wrong with delaying gratification, but I believe you should enjoy sustainable prosperity and abundance every day. So not when you reach the goal. So part of it is acknowledging, because you know what, there are phases in your business development. Like, you may not have as many clients and you have more time to do stuff. Then once you get clients, you don't have as much time. There's different parts to your growth. And so what I do is I have a practice of, if I'm starting to feel agitated or anything, I say, how do I live sustainable prosperity and abundance right now? How do I live that today? And then you can start making those adjustments. If you're doing that every day, you're reviewing that over the week, you're learning from what you did. Like, I overbooked myself, or I didn't plan ahead, or, I'm not planning time for content creation, whatever, you make adjustments the next time. And what'll happen, and the idea of contrast, when things don't go well, instead of being upset about it, look at it like, wow, that helps me fine tune my vision. I didn't like that. And now I can tweak that. And now this is another element of my vision that I really hadn't defined as well. And then it's a daily thing. It's really being committed. If that's what you want, that's just what I want. And that's what my clients want. And so we stay focused on it. And it's not an unpleasant thing to do, because it's like, a lot of times we self-impose the miserable things that we're doing. No one made us do this, or made us do that or whatever. We created that. And that's a big part of my philosophy too, is 100% personal responsibility. If I don't like what's going on in my life right now, I am 100% responsible for what has happened. And I'm 100% responsible for making a change. And that is very energizing. When I blame somebody else, or they did this, or that person didn't do what I want, that is an energy drain. And doing this process takes energy. So it's back to resilience. If you're blaming others, you're not taking responsibility, you're sucking the energy you do have to make things better. So, it does, what I teach and with manifesting, it doesn't take more time, but it takes more focus and mental energy. So it does take more energy, because we're always asking ourselves, what do I want? What does God want for me? How does God want me to serve? Always checking back in. We're not on autopilot. That's the opposite of what I teach. So.
Well, and it may take more energy or feel like it does, but actually what you're doing is you're just focusing energy that may have been scattered to all these other things that really don't matter, or that aren't important, or that aren't where it needs to be. And then you're almost kind of like laser beaming it into, where you're going and what it is that God's calling you to do. And so I think it's really, just reallocating where that energy is going versus, it costing us so much more. And I love how you talked about the personal responsibility. I have a quote on my desk that I look at every day that says, you are creating your results every day at every moment, whether you know it or not. And so, yes, when I'm taking action towards something, and I'm seeing those great results, I know yes, I am creating these results, but the same is true. Like you talked about, either you're seeing negative results that you don't want. So we always have to look in the mirror first, or sometimes even just, we think we're in neutral. And so, we just don't see any results. And really that is also, by our own design. Because like you said, everything that's in our life, we've either invited in and we've allowed it to stay, or we've allowed someone else to bring it in and we've allowed it to stay. And now it's, requiring that attention and focus. And sometimes it distracts us from where it is we want to go. So
yeah. And what when you talked about the energy deflecting, what I think happens is that fear of missing out. We're doing so much, we're doing all this, and that leads to resentments. Because we're kind of hoping to get something from this energy expenditure, hoping to get, and the truth is, it's not how it works. Everybody's busy, and a lot of times you think you would get back certain things, and that's why we're doing it, but we end up not getting what we really want, and we get disappointed about the things that either didn't pan out or they really weren't what we wanted because we weren't having it targeted. So yeah, it's
and I think really the biggest thing that I want to pull out and make sure that our listeners hear is this is a daily process, right? This is even sometimes multiple times a day of just checking in with yourself. And that's why it's so important to know your bigger purpose, to have that clear vision, and to be regularly checking in and checking before we get too far down the road and then say, oh my goodness, how did I end up here? This isn't where I wanted to go, to be able to check in and say, how am I doing? Where am I focusing? What's happening around me? And how, are there any ways I need to make any adjustments to make sure that I'm staying, in the direction that I feel like God is calling me to go. So good. And I think it starts with that awareness, right? And it starts with just then from that awareness, then making that next best decision to move in that direction. So many great ideas and thoughts and things for us to think about. So I know that people are listening right now and thinking, okay, I would love to, keep walking down this path and keep focusing on how to, be resilient and how to have, abundance and prosperity that's sustainable. So tell us real quickly before we go, what are some resources you have to share? Where can someone find you if they want to learn more from you about how they can do this in their own life?
Yeah. Okay. A couple ways. I do have a free gift. It's 5 Christian Biz Abundance myths and excuse me. Where is my free gift? 5 manifesting mistakes and how to correct them. So what I'm talking about, manifesting, is the visualizing, how to do that. So to get that gift, you can go to ChristinaMWeber.com, and that's CHR, Christina M. Weber with 1B.com. I have a long-going podcast, which I would do the podcast if no one was listening.
Right? Isn't it fun?
On fire. I learned so much. If you really want to learn best practices of integrating your faith in an excellent way in all aspects of your business and professional life, it's awesome. Christian Biz Owners on Fire. So if you search for that, you'll find the podcast. And then lastly, I'm very accessible. At least at this point in my life, I'm kind of a deeper dive person. I'm not just a flyby, get the card. So if people are serious and they want to have a conversation, I'm happy to, at this point, learn more about their business, share a little bit about me and mine, to see how we can support each other. And just the way to do that is just direct message me. My big things are more LinkedIn and Facebook. I do check those regularly. We post on all the others, but those are the ones I really check in on. So
fantastic.
Yeah.
We'll make sure that those links for some of those different things get put in the notes. So if somebody's listening, like if you're like me, where you're driving or you're cleaning or you're walking or something like that, and you want to make sure to get in touch with Christina, then you can just check the notes and grab that out of there. I love that. And I was recently a guest on Christina's podcast as well. Yes. It just came out a couple of weeks ago. So if you want to get a 2 for 1, right? And hear both of us having a conversation around some different things, and yet there's so much overlap, right? Because there always is when we're on purpose, would encourage you to listen to that as well. And I have a new guide that I'm putting out there, because I really feel like this shift is happening in me. And as I'm listening to women around me who are just feeling busy, like you mentioned, right? And there's really the sense of like, how can I slow down and focus on what matters most and simplify my life so that I don't feel like it's just passing me by. And so I will put the link to the Do Less, Live More checklist which is really a great way just to start your day with that intention about what do you want to be a part of it and what don't you? Because I think we can get so caught up in the doing and all the expectations and all the agendas of the people and the things around us, and of course the culture and social media that starts coming into our world, and then we end up spending most of our day doing all those other things and not really getting, not really moving forward and where we really feel called to go. So I will put that down in the comments as well, and invite you to make sure you grab those resources. They're always super helpful and very valuable. So I love when our guests are so generous like Christina to share that. So please share that. Please also feel free to share this episode with a friend or someone that you know, especially if they are a business owner as well, and someone who is wanting to grow their faith and do those two things together, because this may be an inspiring encouragement to them as well. And I would like to end with a last question that I've been asking my guests lately. When we talk about those, 7 areas of our life and thinking about the balance that needs to happen, and yet, right, sometimes there are certain ones that we know if we put more attention or intention into, it would just make a big difference. It doesn't always mean it's in a bad place. It just means, wow, this one for me is just such a big one that I know it would shift in a lot of other areas. So of the 7, and I'll just quickly review them for our listeners' sake, they're faith, family, friends, field of work, which can be working for someone else, having a business, or even being a full-time mom or grandma or volunteering, finances, fitness, which is mental and physical wellness, and fun. Christina, which of those areas do you feel like if you put that intention towards in the next year would make the biggest shift for you?
Well, I am putting more attention into feel. And part of it's because of my 3 kids. My second one's launching. And so I have one still at home. And it's been about 5 or 6 years since I've updated my branding photos. So I'm kind of looking at it as like an opportunity to really revisit my brand. I mean, not doing a rebrand, but
Sure.
really look at what I'm doing. I've been mostly offline really in my business. I'm kind of transitioning more online. And it's really kind of fun because I have always really prioritized being a mom, focusing more on the relationships and the family. And I really never and it did cost, it was a choice, but it did cost me to grow slower professionally, but I wouldn't have done it differently. But now I'm more free to do that. And so it's actually really fun. And that's it, with your niche. I think that's the cool thing about this age. It can be a really fun, exciting time when you've done the mom thing, perhaps, or maybe chosen not to, or whatever you did. It's a whole new life. And today's 50 is the new 30 or whatever,
right?
Whatever you want to say. Yeah, there's lots. So I'm very excited about that and I'm having fun with it. So
that's a lot of fun. And I think you're so right. This is a stage of life where our roles are starting to change, whether it's because of motherhood or whether it's because of being in a career for a certain amount of time and just feeling that itch to do something different. And I think we really know ourselves in a deeper way. And we have built up some of that resiliency, that courage, that confidence that we were talking about. And we really know, what abundance and fulfillment and legacy looks like. And so we're ready to show up in a new way. So that's exciting. It'll be fun to see what comes of that for you as you continue to put focus in your field and then help other people in their field as well. So thank you so much for being a guest today, Christina. I really appreciate you and your on fire heart to come alongside and serve others and being with us today. And thank you everyone that's listening. For those of you who've been here since the beginning, this has been a really fun place to be and get to know a lot of new people. And I trust that today's episode has added value for you. So please make sure that you share it with a friend and make sure that you are continuing to live by your purpose so that you can truly create a life that you love, that's serving those that you are called to serve. So thank you, everyone.